Welcome. All you've missed today, we've had a lot of jokes at our expense of having come up together here at Vanderbilt. And a lot of people said, well, what was in the water back then? And I've been thinking about it a lot today. When French Hill left here in 79, Paul, I think you arrived in 80. I arrived in 81 along with, I know he's Senator Haggerty now, but he was just Haggerty back then. And of course, it was Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, just Greg, and Hans von Spakovsky, who was at the Federal Election Commission, and others. Nashville was a very different place. It wasn't Nash Vegas. It was Nashville. And it was a funky town. I mean, some of the best bands you could hear, you'd hear them in a strip mall. And this was a unique experience. And I remember, I don't know, Paul, if it was your first day, but it was certainly when I arrived, we had this orientation day. And after learning a lot about the different classes and the schedule, we finally were all ushered into a big auditorium. And I can't remember what the name of the auditorium, the law school has changed so much since we were here, but the name over the auditorium was the same name as the speaker who came to talk to us. And he was an old codger, and he came up to the stage, he had a cane, and he greeted us in this gravelly voice. And he said, I know you young people are all here to become lawyers. He says, I was a lawyer here 40 years ago or 50 years ago, or a law student here. And my father dropped me off to the law school and said, now, son, I expect you to go and I expect you to study. In fact, I expect you to spend the next 3 years in the law library, not in the bars drinking. And then the old guy said, you know what? I should have listened to my dad, but I didn't. I spent those 3 years in the bar. And you know what? I met a lot of clients. I wouldn't have met any of them in the law library. And that's why my name is over this building. And then he rambled off. And I thought about that a lot. You know, there was something in the water then. Nashville was a fun town. And although we went to Blackacre on Friday nights, afterwards we'd go to some of those clubs and some of those bars. And as the years gone by, I look at a guy like Chairman Atkins, who very early on engaged with digital assets through the Digital Chamber and others, and Senator Haggerty, who came to this, as he explained, early in his own way, and French Hill and others. There was something about, I think, the Vanderbilt people in those days that allowed us to take a different approach and to approach things like the digital asset innovation and other areas in a very open way. And so you can find Paul Atkins, Chairman Atkins' bio on the SEC website. It's rich with his history of having been at the SEC, worked with Chairman Breeden, became a commissioner in his own right. So many people in the SEC world have been alumni of the Chairman Atkins network. But I think that what most distinguishes Paul Atkins, Chairman Atkins, and many of our colleagues is that openness to innovation that we, during our time, that I was honored to serve and that he serves today, that we brought to that openness to furthering innovation in America. So with that introduction, my good friend, always will call him my good friend, Paul Atkins. Have fun.
Great. Thank you very much. Hi there. Good to see you all. Craig Lewis, how about that? So anyway.
It's a tough introduction to follow, but thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Chair Atkins, for being here. As a fellow Vanderbilt alum, it's very exciting to have a day full of prominent alumni here to share their thoughts on these very important topics. Chairman Atkins brings a uniquely deep perspective to this moment before returning to lead the SEC, where he previously served as a commissioner, and in between his periods in public service, he's advised financial institutions and market participants globally on regulatory strategy, risk management, and compliance, giving him a clear view of how policy decisions translate into real-world market behavior. And so that combination, experience both inside the commission and direct engagement with market participants, comes at a very critical time. Chairman Atkins has been clear in his recent remarks that we are now at an inflection point in digital asset policy in the U.S., and the decisions being made now, both across the federal agencies and in Congress, will shape not just this industry, but the future architecture of our capital markets. So what I'm hoping to do here today is unpack how the SEC is thinking about that responsibility, where there's clarity emerging, where there are still open questions, and how this all fits into the broader push towards a durable framework. So thank you again for joining us. And I guess to start, a more Vanderbilt-focused question. So earlier today, as we mentioned, we had your former roommate, I believe, Senator Haggerty,
I was
join
just
us.
with them here at the law school.
Yes, and I would love to hear, back in the days when you guys were roommates, did you ever think you'd be back here in this capacity, having these sorts of conversations?
Well, with Bill, yes, of course. With me, no. But anyway, no, it's fun to come back and see all the changes that have been here in town. And so even the house I used to live on with Bill on Music Row there doesn't exist anymore. It is now a recording studio. So how about that? But anyway, so it's great to be here and the students. I've actually. Everyone in my family has been educated in Nashville. Only one at Belmont, the rest of us at Vanderbilt. So anyway, so we have a real connection here to Nashville.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to have you here, and we hope to do future iterations of this just with such a strong network of alumni. So as I remarked before, you've described this moment as a turning point for digital asset markets. And so I think starting there at a high level from your perspective, what do you think has fundamentally changed, either in the market itself or how policymakers are approaching digital assets?
Well, both. So maybe I should go back here 2-3 years to the blockchain conference here in Nashville, where Bill Haggerty was very instrumental, from what I understand, to getting it here. And so, candidate to be president, Donald Trump, was here. And as an offhand remark that somebody told him to do, he said, "On day one, I'm going to fire Gary Gensler." Well, and so I mean, you can, if you look at that, I'm sure you all have seen that video clip of it. But I mean, the shock on his face when this huge roar erupt. He had actually said it another 2 times just to make sure that wasn't just a fluke. But that was quite a microcosm of the pent-up energy in this particular subsector of the economy and of innovation, and of the frustration that everybody had with respect to the SEC. And so so I am still living that now, as far as the PTSD that I've experienced and the staff at the SEC in many ways. And of course, my predecessor destroyed the CFTC before he destroyed the SEC. And so you, Chris, had to pick up the pieces there and try to put them back together. So anyway, I do have to say that the staff of the SEC has surprised me in that I expected sullenness and hostility and, you're a Trumpy or, whatever else they might think. But instead, I mean, people are leaning into this. I mean, there was a discussion here. I just heard French and Chris, you were asked that question about, a hub, like a innovation hub, which, I actually did away with, not out of any animus to innovation, exactly opposite, but it had gotten at the SEC such a bad name under Gensler that people said, "Oh yeah, I go in there to talk to these guys, and I go home and find a subpoena on my front stoop." And so, what I wanted to do was emphasize that there is no one hub. The entire place better be focused on innovation and moving forward, and I don't want to have any excuses from anyone. And that has really resonated with the staff, I think. And so in every division, even in enforcement, believe it or not, we're embracing innovation and trying to figure out how can we do better, how can we put meaning to what the challenge from the president is, to have America be the digital and innovation capital of the world, to have things developed here in the United States with American technology by Americans and by American and other investors, of course. So that's job one right now, and I think we're making progress. And I was just over at the law school with Bill doing a talk to the student body there, at least some of it, and so what I was trying to emphasize to them was, when I left law school and started work in New York back in 1984. It was, similarly, the country was, coming out of a recession, but Ronald Reagan was the new president, relatively new, and, but the economy was in, I guess I graduated in 83 and started in 84, and it was, you could feel how it was, starting to surge. And so that's the message that I wanted these students to hear, that they are coming out, I think, at a very exciting time, because the steps that we and the CFTC are taking together to bring clarity, regardless of what happens in Congress, and we need this bill to get through and become statute, because we need something, chiseled in stone, that, there can't be any retrocession by, Gensler 2.0 coming up in the future. We can do a lot regulatorily, but, we just have to make sure it takes root and, can't be done away with. But all of this, I think, is going to drive, economic growth and vitality that we can't really even imagine right now. Just the simple, from a financial services perspective, of the prospect of having instantaneous DVP, RVP, delivery versus payment, receipt versus payment on chain, with things, forget stable coins or whatever, but we've okayed our approved people to go forward with tokenized money market mutual funds. Tokenized bank deposits are going to be next and whatnot. So all of this, on chain, the payment rail being with, trusted things, that types of payment that people already are accustomed to, and then as well as new ones. Let the market go at it and see, what gets market acceptance. And so, vive la différence. So we'll see.
Yes, and I think to your earlier point, a lot of our member companies at the Blockchain Association have come in and engaged with the SEC Crypto Task Force and other staff at the SEC, and I think that's been one of the most welcome differences, is being able to come in, do demos, kind of provide expertise and experience in the technology. And that's been a total shift, obviously, from the prior administration. So I know we have a lot of people at BA that are really appreciative of that approach. And I want to spend a little bit of time on regulatory clarity, because I think for most of the industry, this has been a gating issue for years, not a lack of willingness to comply, but a lack of clear operational rules to comply with. And so you all have obviously recently taken steps to introduce more structure into that conversation, particularly through the joint taxonomy on digital assets with the CFTC, which constitutes a very important shift from kind of a case-by-case analysis to something more predictable for those in the industry. So in your opinion, looking at that guidance, what are the most important takeaways for builders deciding how to launch in the United States?
Well, the biggest thing that could actually be happening, right now is, finally bearing the hatchet by the SEC and the CFTC to actually collaborate. Like, who would have thought, right? So anyway, and something that seems like a duh moment to most sane people who are not in Washington, to have two regulatory agencies really kind of figure out, where do we divide the pie here, and so we're just at an incomparable moment. The president appointed, thank goodness, Mike Selig to be at the CFTC. Great guy. Obviously, he was recruited from a law firm by Hester Peirce, after inauguration, to be chief counsel of the Crypto Task Force, which she was heading, and still is. She's Crypto Mama, Associates Project Crypto now, and so so that's perfect. But Mike Selig just did a wonderful job there, and the fact that the president listened and put him in charge of the CFTC, I think, is amazing. So never have the two agencies being so aligned. So, in that, by our interpretative release, which of course the CFTC joined us in, which we're calling the last chapter of Howie, is the way we're describing it at the SEC, because there was the whole thing investment contracts. So God bless the Supreme Court back in SEC versus Howie in 1946 to take a stab at trying to define something that Congress threw into the statute without defining investment contracts. So they had a workable definition. It's focused on, what's a contract? It's an agreement between two parties, promises, and all of that. So, what we have broken with the past is focusing not on the orange, not on the token, but on the ecosystem of promises that people buy into, and that's what creates that contract between the two sides. So I think that separating us from the past, and I think then we're able to focus on what are tokenized securities. Those are securities. Genius Act took stablecoins off the table, thank goodness. Let Jonathan Gould, the control of the currency, worry about those. I'm happy not to worry about it. And then it just leaves, the rest of the whole ecosystem there, and that's digital commodities, digital tools, and digital collectibles as being not part of the Securities and Exchange Commission's remit. So no more are we the Something and Everything Commission. We're the Securities and Exchange Commission, and focusing on that. So no more regulation through enforcement. No more two fortresses, I like to say, SEC, CFTC, with a no man's land in between. The crossfire kills every would-be errant new product stumbling in there and getting cut down in the crossfire. So now we are out to give people certainty, and so that they're not going to be wondering. And so my dream is to, as we work more and more with the CFTC, to have in the future the goal of having a super app type of cross recognition, and we can do substituted compliance with whatever country abroad, but why can't we do it with our sister regulator in Washington? And so that's the goal, to really have it so that it's seamless as between the market intermediary and what the registration can be, and there might be little nuances here and there, but it shouldn't be the end of the world to have to upend your whole way of doing business. Like when people have tried portfolio margining in the past, that's just been anathema on both sides of the two agencies. We're out to change that, not just in my lifetime, but here in the next year, to make that possible. So that would have been a pipe dream even 10 years ago. So anyway, so all these things, not to belabor the point, I just think that the disintermediation that will come, the innovative spirit that can come out of all of this, I think is good for everyone, for investors, market participants, and even those who may be disintermediated. They can, there's plenty of time to see the future now and to try to pivot and to get with a new reality.
Yeah. And I think kind of diving a little bit deeper into some of those kind of defining lines that are necessary for clarity for the industry, where do you draw the cleanest line between a capital raising transaction that implicates securities laws and when that investment contract can cease to exist?
Well, it's easy to fall back on, well, it matters circumstances and, whatever. So, I mean, that really is, the rub, I guess. But, we try to lay that out, this interpretative release, because at some point, promises are either completed or they're impossible and no longer extant. And so I think that's really the focus of it. But we will have Reg Crypto that we'll be proposing here shortly, It's in fact at OIRA now, which is the next step before being published. So that's pretty exciting. That's focused on the 33 Act and how to give much more meat to what we're talking about. And so we'll be going out for obviously comments. So I think everybody should focus on that. And we're serious about comment. We're not like the predecessor here that I had where, it was all kind of disingenuousness. But we're obviously, we want to hear from the marketplace, want to see how we can make this, safe harbors and other things that we're going to be building into it, exemptive relief and whatnot, to make it workable.
Great. And you'd mentioned earlier about disintermediation. So I think this is a good opportunity to turn to DeFi, because I think this is where existing regulatory frameworks are under the most pressure. A lot of the assumptions embedded in securities laws around centralized issuers, identifiable intermediaries, and control over assets don't map neatly onto systems that are open, permissionless, non-custodial, and in many cases governed by distributed participants rather than a single entity. So I think starting at a high level, how does the SEC approach applying securities laws to systems where there is no centralized issuer or intermediary and no single party exercises unilateral control?
Boy, you start with a hard one. So anyway, that really is, of course, the third rail that, we need to focus carefully on. But that's why we'll be coming out with our 34 Act addressing a project. So the Red Cryptos for 33 Act fundraising, and so innovation exemption for whitelisting and automated market makers and things like that, under the 34 Act, and give a cabined kind of framework and area for people to experiment and see how things go. And so sometimes people talk about, oh yeah, my thing is DeFi, and there's really no management here. Well, you kind of look through it, and it's not quite what it was cracked up to be, maybe. And where fees and other things come into it to support the inner workings of it. So we need, and first admit that we don't have a lot of experience in this, and so we need help. And this, I think, the SEC has never tried this in this past, anything like it. And so, why not? And why shouldn't we? And I think we have the authority to do it. And as soon as long as we're trying to make it clear to the current folks who are there, the folks who could be disintermediated, that no, this is for you too. This is not just for some startup in its garage, but this is for you to figure out how to make things work better, more efficiently, and automated in an automated fashion. So let's try it. Let's see what happens. So again, we'll be coming out with our parameters around that innovation exemption. So I'm really excited about that. I think there's a lot to be done in that area.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in this room are also very excited about it. Selfishly, before joining the Blockchain Association, I worked at Uniswap Labs, a decentralized exchange. So we obviously are very appreciative of the work that you all are doing in this area, because I think DeFi specifically, builders are very hesitant to start their projects and build here given the prior history of enforcement. And so I think just taking a step back when we think about disintermediation and DeFi, to you, why is it so important that we make sure that we're onshoring this development here, and making sure that the United States is the world leader in the development of open permissionless systems and decentralized technology?
Well, my boss, the president, said that. But anyway, leaving that aside, it really is important. Europe is a great contra example of how they got all excited about digital assets and everything else, and so then they had a big taxonomy legislation and whatnot that came out of Parliament, and so we were those of us who were involved in this area were just bewailing that fact that here we're stuck in the Stone Age, and if anything, the whole regulation through enforcement, a type of approach that was coming out of the SEC and to a lesser extent the CFTC was just terrible, and then not even to mention the bank regulators and Project Choke Point and everything else. So that was just really like the heavy hand of the state coming in and really displacing everything. So now again, we are focused on trying to change that and to make sure that things are done here on shore, because if you look at the Europeans, so Parliament did its thing, but then you have the big, evil European Commission. Don't quote me on that, but anyway, but they're not evil, but whatever. I mean, they just can't help themselves, but they basically strangled the baby in the crib with overweening regulation and whatnot. And so we have a great opportunity now to push forward. And with one example I love to make is FTX, which was a disaster for investors and customers of it, but there was one real bright spot, and that was Ledger X, which was a swaps trading platform for crypto, and so they were focused on that area, and so it had been purchased by Sam Bankman-Fried as part of his strategy, I guess, to come, onshore to the U.S. That, and then lots of political donations. But anyway, so then in the implosion of FTX, LedgerX didn't skip a beat. It was, under CFTC rules, and the NFA came in to, kick the tires and examine them. And so they had segregated accounts for customers, and boom, nobody lost any money. And it was like a real triumph of a good regulatory scheme that wasn't overweening, like not like broker-dealer registration, but whatever. But fit for purpose for more of a institutional market. And so boom, it was a real success story, I think. So that is why we need to do things under American law here in the United States for the benefit of American and other investors, and we will then experience the benefit of that, worldwide, frankly.
And I think one area where this tension between disintermediated systems and regulated intermediaries, where we see this show up a lot, is in regards to tokenization. And I know there's a hearing in the House Financial Services Committee last week. The Blockchain Association CEO Summer testified amongst some traditional financial players, and you could kind of see it play out a little bit, the differences in opinion, kind of how tokenization should be handled. I'd love to hear more from your perspective on, I guess, starting overall, kind of looking at it at a high level. How do you view tokenization? Is it kind of an incremental improvement on the system that we've already had, or kind of a structural shift in capital markets?
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens, right? But I mean, it's clearly an incremental improvement. I mean, if we can, like I was talking about, T0, for many instruments being the potential, why not? That's great. I mean, no more uncertainty as to clearing and settling and all of that. That would be a huge advancement that people have dreamt of for centuries, so that's great. But there are probably many more things that we don't even think about. So, distributed ledger technology. Whenever people ask me about, tokens or this, that, or some other token, is that something that I approve of or whatever, I'm agnostic about all of that. Let the market figure out what is good, and we should focus on making the soil fertile for new ideas to grow and flourish or perish. I mean, depending on whether there's uptake or not. And we shouldn't be protecting incumbents. We shouldn't be, subsidizing or whatever of upstarts. But we should let people, and most importantly, investors and participants and whatnot choose what they think is best. So, there's a lot of negativism out there, even now as we talk about private credit and whatnot. I mean, don't believe what you read in the paper. Of course, you all are smart enough to know that, but people out in other walks of life don't necessarily know it, and so part of my job is to proselytize that, for innovation, for change, and I think that's what has made America great and separates us from other countries, and we ought to foster that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think when we think about tokenization, obviously, there's a lot of immense benefits, whether it's reducing counterparty risks, increasing settlement times. When we think about transitioning to a new kind of rails for the financial system, where do you see, in regards to tokenization, the biggest risk? Is it potentially liquidity, fragmentation, market integrity, operational risk? And how do you think, and how is the SEC thinking about how we manage those risks without slowing down innovation?
Yeah, well, all of those, frankly, because when we talk about DeFi and other things, the real, what does that do to our national market system as far as, liquidity? Are we then just completely atomized? I mean, I of course, decried our Reg NMS back in 2004 or 5, whenever the commission went against Cindy Glassman's and my dissent, but I can say I told you so, because the whole fragmentation, or not necessarily fragmentation, but the in effect subsidization of this multiplicity of venues came about and just made it much more complex, more than it probably needs to be in a normal marketplace, among other things. There are other issues with all of that, but now I think we need to make sure that there is interconnectivity, and you don't necessarily have to do that by the government mandating it, because even back when ECNs were coming about, alternative trading systems back 20 years ago or more, there were market solutions to it. I still remember Lava was something that ultimately Citibank owned, but it was a way to connect various alternative trading systems so that you could find the best price, and it didn't take the government to mandate it. The market came up with its own solutions. So I think there's so many ways that ultimately smart people will be able to come up with solutions, and we just have to, again, make sure that we are leaving the door open for those sorts of things without mandating some particular straitjacket that's going to foreclose effective new ideas from coming up. So that, again, is why we want to do this innovation exemption, for this sort of experimentation. Why we want to do Reg Crypto to deal with fundraising and startup exemptions, and just an investment contract safe harbor, so for the fundraising side. So I think all of those are necessary things that we need to foster.
Great. And I think, one of the things that's also been part of the debate around tokenization, and we saw this play out a little bit in the hearing last week, around, the SEC's authority to issue, an innovation exemption, no action relief, other types of iterative guidance, so we can, further study exactly how these markets will operate before doing a full, notice and comment period. And so this is probably a bit of a leading question, but in your opinion, the SEC has the authority to issue this sort of iterative guidance to assess the market before going to a full rulemaking period, correct?
Yes. So I think we do. We have pretty broad authority under the 34 and 33 Act, and then Congress specifically said as much, and and under the 240 Acts, frankly, as well. So, a lot of this stuff, we will feel our way around, and the innovation exemption doesn't take any rulemaking, in my view, and we'll be coming out with obviously a proposal there with Red Crypto and whatnot. So, these are just normal steps to take, and I think we have enough of a runway now, even notwithstanding what may happen in the midterms, although, I really still want a friendly Congress, obviously. So, because they can throw, attacks on the road in front of our tires, but, they're not going to really slow us down. But still, we have to, make sure that the seeds we plant will take root and grow so that they can't be, pulled up by whatever may come in the future.
And I know you'd mentioned earlier in this conversation the importance of getting the Clarity Act over the line. So obviously, there's great collaboration between the SEC and CFTC, and then we're now starting to see, more industry friendly and appropriate kind of regulation from a legislative standpoint. And so, in terms of how you all kind of interact with the Clarity Act in Congress, what are the issues that you all are looking to Congress for in terms of guidance versus things, as you just mentioned, like the innovation exemption and other items that the SEC has the authority to do on their own?
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever Congress starts to consider a statute or a bill, I mean, you're always keeping your fingers crossed then behind your back that nothing awry is going to come out of that. As long as, we have enough exemptive authority to smooth over any knucklehead's idea that might find its way in there on the floor or elsewhere. I mean, that's the real danger, of course. And there are a few things in the current draft that we're not thrilled about. But anyway, so we'll see. But we do need to have legislation to help, put in place firmly the stuff that we're doing, we at the SEC and the CFTC as well.
And I guess a follow-up question there, this room, we also have people joining us on a live stream, are full of different builders and innovators in the space who are engaging heavily, I think, both with the regulatory agencies, with SEC Crypto Task Force, but also with Capitol Hill. Is there anything in particular, any particular policy area as it pertains to market structure that you think industry, others building in the space can do a better job of kind of advocating for or, pushing towards SEC kind of authority and guidance? What areas would you say would be most helpful for the industry to help push on?
Well, I think, and I'm not going to go into this because, I mean, it's whatever I say can and will be used against me. So I think that, we need a good, focused bill that will give us and the CFTC a good, firm footing so that we can build all the things that we're talking about. So that's why, for you all to make sure that, these differences can be bridged. So there was, there was an agreement there on at least yield for stable coins. So anyway, so that's one issue off the table. And then, now there's some others. But I think we need to make sure that, the definition of tokenized security, it remains focused. As it gets broader, then that makes it more difficult for us to do our work. But anyway, I leave that up to you all. I'm not going to wade into pros and cons. But again, I think as you see right now with a mostly friendly Congress for your industry, I think you all need to be engaged in this upcoming election because, I mean, to, have Congress really veer off track is not going to do any of us any good, and it's going to put a lot more, questions into the future that, because people then just have, oh gosh, maybe this is, again, a passing phase. So we've got to make sure that your friends, are, in Congress and can, continue and get in there. So anyway, I think you saw that how that really paid benefits in the last election. I mean, to have Bernie Moreno, who actually built DLT based, he was a car dealer and he saw the whole crazy system of transferring titles. So titles are in several states are on blockchain because of Bernie Moreno. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. So to have more people like that who can demystify this area in Congress, I think is really valuable. You cannot really gainsay that, I think.
So I think we covered a lot of ground, and as we're starting to wrap up, I kind of wanted to take a step back and look a bit at the bigger picture. So I think if we were sitting here 2 years from now, which hopefully we all will be at this annual event moving forward, what does success look like to you for the digital asset industry?
Well, I think, so if you had the Clarity Act passed on top of the Genius Act, and the SEC and CFTC motoring ahead, and have we'll put our things out for notice and comment, and so we'll be turning this stuff around. We're going to have probably 30 proposals out this year, so please comment and please give us your ideas, but I want to finalize these things as quickly as possible, so there's a lot of activity to be done this year and next year, and that's just that's not just digital assets, but that's everything. My mantra now is to make IPOs great again. We have half the number of public companies as we had 30 years ago, and that's because it's nice to be a private company. It's comfortable. You don't get sued by class action lawyers, and you don't have the weaponized corporate governance framework thrown back at you, and you don't have to build this big apparatus to comply with often spurious SEC types of disclosure demands. So we're out to rectify all three of those to the extent that we can. Tomorrow I'll be in Florida with Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis talking about what they're calling the boom belt, which is pretty interesting. But Texas and the Texas Stock Exchange will be there, but Texas is out to try to win friends and influence people, I guess, but by through having a more open or welcoming type of structure around corporate governance, litigation, and rules. So that's great music to my ears, and obviously we're agnostic as to states, but that's why we have a federal system and to allow experimentation and competition among the states. So all of that, I think, is a long-winded way of saying, let's keep innovation, experimentation going, and if we can have a good, solid framework to build on, then that's for the best. And if we can have, continuity, with respect to the Congress and its interaction with the White House and the courts, that's a dream come true too, if we can keep that going. But all of that makes for a good environment for entrepreneurs and investors to take chances. And that's what it really comes down to, individuals making the decision, and all of that is, here's the 250th anniversary of the United States. It's also the 250th anniversary of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And so obviously he nailed it as far as the power of the free market and the invisible hand, to make something that it's for people to collaborate. And it's not just altruism, it's because, they're incentivized to do that and to be nice and good to their neighbors and don't lie, cheat, and steal, and all of that, comes down to all those, golden rule, 10 commandments type of things. So that's what makes our system so unique, and so we just need to foster that and continue it.
Yeah, and I think, and you touched on this a bit in that response, but to close out, We've talked a lot about bringing innovation onshore. I think it was here in Nashville a couple years ago, and then candidate Trump talked about making America the crypto capital of the world. In closing, what would your message be to entrepreneurs who are considering building new projects here and are deciding whether to build in the United States today?
I'd say go for it. Come here, and obviously, because I think the rule of law, the enforceability of contracts, can't be minimized. So our system does work, and without kind of the government like the SEC making it up as it goes and being uncertain, am I doing it okay, but tomorrow maybe not, or the same on the banking side. You just have to look at Silicon Valley Bank and some other experiences where it's really the regulator's fault. Just as much as the firm not having the proper risk management, but whatever. So we need to we regulators need to focus on what's in our remit and to do our job properly and with a minimal amount of interference in the marketplace, and then let the market figure it out, and then catch bad guys who that's part of human nature, that'll always be there. But for the vast majority of people who are honest, hardworking, and want to create a better product for people voluntarily to buy, like Adam Smith has outlined, I think is really the key.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us and for everything you've done to provide clarity for the industry. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.